Hello and welcome to another special edition of Nightlight on the topic of the end time. Speaking once again over Skype with Joseph Candel. Welcome back to the program, Joe. In this program and the next, we're going to be covering the very basics of what Bible prophecy says about what we can expect to happen between now and the second coming of Jesus Christ, and onwards for 1,000 years after that, all the way up into the creation of a new heaven and a new earth, as described in the last two chapters of the Bible, Revelation chapter 21 and 22. Joe, people have been thinking that they've been living in the time of the end all throughout history. It seems that even the disciples had the idea that Jesus was going to come back in their time. So how do we know, or what makes you believe that this is really it, that this is really the actual end time that we're living in right now?
If we look at Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3, Jesus himself told his apostles, because they were asking, well, what's going to be the sign of your coming, Jesus, and the end of this age? And Jesus answered and said, well, you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. For nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom.
Right.
And there shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places, and all these are the beginning of sorrows. Mm-hmm. You know, when it talks about sorrows, Greek word for that is birth pangs. And you know how a woman, when she gives birth, let's say it starts at 10 minutes, she has a contraction every 10 minutes, and of course that's painful. But as the labor pains increase, after, let's say, 5 minutes, you know, the labor pains have intensified, they're harder, and they're coming more frequently.
Right.
You know, and of course you get down to 2 minutes, and then she's really having serious labor pains, and of course, every 2 minutes, it's very frequent. And that's what Jesus said it would be like. The signs that we're seeing, we're going to see more of them happening, closer together, and even bigger.
Signs of the times.
And you're listening to Nightlight with Joseph Candel, and we're talking about the major events as predicted in the Bible that will happen during the end time and beyond. Now, we're not going to try to put a date on when these things will happen, but we do know that the signs of the end that Jesus and the other Bible prophets talked about, wars, famines, natural disasters, diseases, knowledge being increased, and many more, although these events have been happening all throughout history, in recent years, they have been ever increasing in severity and intensity. And I like the illustration that Joe used of a woman in labor.
Yes.
Joe, I don't know how far we are along with the birth process leading up to the second coming of Jesus and the birth of his heavenly kingdom on earth, but things sure seem to be getting very intense. And I think many people are convinced that, yes, the signs of the times are happening. They're increasing, they're intensifying. On this program, I'd like to map out for our listeners the expected order of events that happen according to Bible prophecy. Not so much when, but what will happen and in what order.
Yes.
So, Joe, looking into the future, according to Bible prophecy, what is the next major event that's going to happen on the timeline of events leading up to the second coming of Jesus Christ?
The next major event that most Christians are waiting for and looking for, and we're seeing a lot of the signs that this event seems to be transpiring, there's going to come a world government,
right,
and the eventual rise of the Antichrist, who will be the leader of this world government.
Right.
So this is something that we read on a daily basis now. They're talking about global governance. To solve the world's problems, we need a global government. We need a new worldwide currency. So this is the next big sign that we're waiting for. And it's in the Bible. It says in Daniel 11:21, talking about the Antichrist, it tells you how he's going to rise to power. It says, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And verse 24, it says, and he shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and shall do which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them, in other words, the people of the world, the prey and spoil and riches. His economic policy of the Antichrist will be to share the wealth with the poor people. And of course, this will make them very popular.
Right.
So this is what we're expecting to happen. And the way the world government is going to come in, and we see this being played out every day, they're going to create chaos, and they're going to use war, economic collapse, disasters, and terrorism, or even the threat of terrorism, which would result in chaos. And this is what's preparing the way for the rise of a world government and its eventual leader, the Antichrist.
Yes, the Antichrist shall come. And when he comes, he will sign a 7-year covenant. And we know that from that point on, there's precisely 7 years until the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, how long there is between now and the signing of the covenant is uncertain. But once that covenant has been signed, then Bible prophecy locks into a very precise timeline with the major events happening according to a set timetable. Joe, let's talk about this 7-year covenant that the Antichrist signs. What does it mean, covenant, and what's it all about?
There's two aspects the Bible brings out about this covenant. And one, it'll probably be, first of all, a peace treaty. In other words, it sounds like from Daniel 11:22, 23, and that chapter, Daniel 11:21 through 45, talks about the rise of the Antichrist, his reign, and the wars that he's going to fight. So this covenant, one, could be a peace treaty from a major war in the Middle East.
I see.
And secondly, in the Bible, in Daniel 11:28, about the Antichrist, it says his heart shall be against the holy covenant. And in verse 30, it says, and he shall have indignation against the holy covenant. So that is showing us that this covenant is also religious. And it will probably resolve at least for temporarily, the Jerusalem problems. As we know from the news, Jerusalem has been a major stumbling block to the peace process. And so they'll probably make it Jerusalem an international city where Islam, Christianity, and Judaism will be able to worship in Jerusalem, and maybe people of all faith. So they'll have a solution for Jerusalem, and they will share it. The main religious groups will share Jerusalem, so that will help solve that problem, at least for a time.
Right.
This will also enable the Jews to rebuild their temple. We know that they have the building material for this temple. They already have it fabricated and stored in Israel. The priests who do the sacrifices are all ready.
Wow.
The temple attendants are ready. You see this quite a bit in the news. So they will rebuild their temple for the third time. The last time it was destroyed was in 70 AD. The Romans came in and destroyed the temple.
Yes.
So they haven't had a temple since 70 AD, nor have they had ritual animal sacrifices, which is a big part of the Jewish religion. So they'll resume their sacrifices, and this will be, again, a temporary solution. But this, under the covenant, will involve a peace treaty and a religious holy covenant to work out the problems between the Palestinian Arabs and the Israelis.
Nightlight, keeping you in tune with the times.
Okay, Joe, just to recap, the Antichrist signs the 7-year covenant. He solves the problems of Jerusalem, making it an international city, most likely. The Jews are allowed to rebuild their temple during the first 3.5 years of the Antichrist's reign. Now, there's a lot of different opinions as to when the end time will begin in earnest. But whenever the third Jewish temple is built, that will be an indisputable marker that we are for sure in the first half of the Antichrist's reign. Joe, do we know how far into the last 7 years that the temple is rebuilt?
Well, it seems that as soon as the Antichrist confirms his 7-year covenant and his reign begins, I would imagine they'll probably start working on the temple right away. Now, there is a prophecy in Daniel chapter 8, verse 13 and 14, which talks about, that gives a time period of 2,300 days. It says, how long should be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation to give both the host and the sanctuary, which is the temple, to be trodden underfoot. And Daniel received that it would be 2,300 days. When you break that timetable down into days, one possibility, the actual rebuilding of the temple could take about, now this is roughly here, 195 days to rebuild it. And maybe the actual sacrifices would be 965 days. Now, the reason we come to that figure is that we know that during the Great Tribulation, when the Antichrist breaks the covenant in the middle of the 7 years, we know that the tribulation lasts 1,260 days, right? And we know that the wrath of God is 45 days.
Right.
So there you have 1,335 days. So if you minus that from the 2,300 days, that leaves you 965 days of the actual sacrifice.
Yes.
If this interpretation is correct. But we know the temple will be built during the first 3.5 years of the 7-year covenant. We know the sacrifices will resume during the first 3.5 years of the 7-year covenant, because what will happen in the middle of the 7 years, the Antichrist will take away the sacrifice. He'll take over the temple, sitting in the temple saying that he's God. And it sounds like he'll be ruling and reigning the world from Jerusalem.
Nightlight. You're listening to an international edition of Nightlight, shining God's love light to the world.
And you're listening to a special edition of Nightlight. And we're trying to lay out for you a basic roadmap through the end time, through the major events of the end time as prophesied in the Bible. Briefly, let's recap the order of events so far. We have coming up, we don't know how far into the future, the rise of the Antichrist and his signing of a 7-year covenant that solves many of the world's problems, also allows the Jews to build the third Jewish temple, and allows equal access to Jerusalem for Jews, Muslims, and Christians to the holy places there. But then suddenly he changes his mind. Is that what happens?
Yes.
He breaks the covenant or the peace agreement that he himself authored and engineered.
Maybe the other side is not keeping their part of the bargain. Maybe he's having troubles with the Israelis, and the religion. They're still having religious squabbles, But his heart, we do know, does go against the Holy Covenant, as brought out in verse 28 and 30 in Daniel chapter 11. That's what happens. So he decides that in the midst of the 7 years, he breaks the covenant and he causes the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And Daniel gives a very clear picture of that in Daniel 11, chapter 11, verse 31. When he breaks it, it describes what the Antichrist does. It says, "And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength." Now that sanctuary of strength is referring to the temple, the rebuilt temple. "And shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate." So the AC takes away the daily sacrifice, and they place something either in the temple or on the temple ground, something called the abomination that maketh desolate.
What do you think that means, Joe?
Well, first of all, Jesus quotes this verse. He cites this verse in Matthew 24:15. Jesus said that when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, which is the temple, whoso readeth, let him understand. So the Lord's saying, look, man, you guys, when you in the time of the end, who are living during this time, when you see this abomination of desolation, you better understand. You better know what's going on, because he goes on to say in verse 21 in the same chapter, he says, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." Jesus cites this abomination. And to answer your question, what is the abomination of desolation? Well, if we go to the book of Revelation, in Revelations chapter 13, verse 14 and 15, it talks about the image of the beast, or the image of the Antichrist. So it says that, the false prophet, who's the Antichrist's chief aide, his propaganda manager, he deceives the world, and that he encourages them to make an image to the Antichrist.
And this abomination, is this the one referred to in Revelations as the image of the beast?
Yes, if we look at verse 14 and 15 in Revelations 13, it's talking about the false prophet. It says, "And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he," the false prophet, "had power to do in the sight of the beast," the Antichrist, "saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which is the Antichrist, which had the wound by a sword and did live.
Yes.
And verse 15 says, And he, the false prophet, had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. A lot of Bible scholars believe this image of the beast, or Jesus called it the Abomination of Desolation, could be some sort of cybernetic representation of the Antichrist.
Wow.
And this could be, endowed with artificial intelligence. And even some of the recent news clips on this, it says, this is a title of one article, it says, "Are we on the brink of creating a computer with a human brain?" You see some scientists, especially in Japan, they're really into this, like this Japanese guy. He's made a carbon copy of himself.
Gosh.
It looks just like the guy who made it. And he could, cause them to move his lips and to make facial expressions. And they've also done this with the girl, too. They got the real girl and made an image of her.
Wow, so this could actually be a prototype of the image of the beast.
So this image of the beast, the false prophet, the Antichrist, and world government will want people to worship it. Because it says if you don't worship it, you should be killed.
Right.
Now, my idea on this, my theory, what this Android or whatever the final product will be, I think that it's going to have everybody's details in this, computerized image of the beast.
Right.
You get a birth certificate, health insurance, passport, driver's license, medical treatment. They get your information. And so
Yes.
I think what they will do, they will put everybody's information into this image of the beast.
Yes.
So during the tribulation, when they set up their economic system, which we'll cover in just a minute, they will have the information. They will know who took the 666 mark of the beast chip implant or whatever that technology will be. So we'll all be in the computer already, or the image of the beast will have the information about us. So they're going to be looking for you because you didn't take the mark. So I think it's possible that the image of the beast will just spit out the names of the people who have not received the 666, because that's part of the program they have, and that's brought out very clearly in Revelations chapter 13, verses 16 and 18. It says, "And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." And here is wisdom. "Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, or 666. So this is the coming economic system that they will put in place when the Antichrist breaks the covenant halfway through the 7-year covenant and the Great Tribulation begins. It's going to be mandatory to buy and sell. You'll have to have this chip implant or whatever technology will be, and you'll need to worship the image of the beast, or the Abomination of Desolation, as Jesus called it.
Nightlight's interview of the week.
And we're talking about the major events of the end time as predicted in Bible prophecy, which history has proven to be unerringly accurate. So we can be sure that its predictions of future events that have not yet happened will also be just as accurately fulfilled. Anyway, we've gotten halfway through the 7 years of the Antichrist's reign, at which point he goes back on his word, breaks the covenant, sets up his image, and institutes a completely cashless society centered around the mandatory 666 mark of the beast, which people have to receive in their right hand or their forehead or be killed. At this point begins the last 3.5 years of human history, leading up to the second coming of Jesus Christ, a period known as the Great Tribulation. Right now, Joe, tell us about the Great Tribulation. What's going to be happening, and where are we going to be, we who believe in Jesus?
One of the first things we have to look at, what's the Antichrist going to be doing? False prophet he's promoting the image of the beast, the Abomination of Desolation. But here's what the Antichrist is doing in Revelations 13, chapter 13, verses 5 through 7. It says, "And there was given unto him," the Antichrist, "a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months, which is 3.5 years. In Revelation 11:3, it gives us the days of the Great Tribulation, which is, it says, in 1,260 days. And it goes on to say that in verse 6, and he opened his mouth, the Antichrist opened his mouth and blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him, the Antichrist, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So, that's his agenda. He's the Antichrist is making war against the saints. But in Daniel 11:37, he abolishes all religions. He not only abolishes Christianity, it says, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all.
Right.
So he's making also quite a few enemies here. Christians, people who are strong in the faith in Islam or even Judaism and some of these different religions, when he says to worship him and he's abolished all religions, he's also going to have quite a bit of trouble in the tribulation. Even it says in Daniel 11, different countries will rebel against him. But for us, the Lord will give us power for the hour in this great tribulation period.
Wow.
Daniel 11, chapter 11, verse 32 and 33, it says, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits.
Wow.
And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. So the Lord's going to give us the grace. He's going to give us the power. Miracles will be happening. Healings will be happening. The Lord will be using all kind of signs and wonders to be able to preach the gospel, to continue on, to get out the message so people can still receive Jesus and they can also understand what's happening, when Jesus is going to come back. We'll be able to comfort other people and help them through this very difficult time. In fact, the most difficult time in all the history of the world. And also the Lord has a plan. It says in Revelation 12:6, it says, and the woman, symbolic of the Christians, fled into the wilderness where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So, a lot of Christians will be able to flee into the wilderness. We're not sure if that means countries who are rebelling against the Antichrist reign at the last 3.5 years of a 7-year reign, or the Lord will have special places around the world where we, will be safe and protected and even supernaturally fed like the children of Israel were when the Lord rained down manna and also gave them quail.
That's right.
So we'll also have protection. That doesn't mean every Christian will be in the wilderness, because there'll still be a lot of Christians witnessing, preaching the gospel, warning people not to worship the Antichrist, not to receive the 666 chip implant, not to bow down before this image of the beast. It's going to be a time of victory, too. The Lord's going to raise up prophetesses, prophets, and they're going to be out there witnessing, and the Lord even protecting them, just like in Revelations 11 when it talks about the two witnesses. Nobody could touch them until their witness was finished after 1,260 days.
Wow, and they're standing right there in Jerusalem, presumably, Joe, very close to where the Antichrist has enthroned himself in the rebuilt Jewish temple and demanding to be worshipped as a god. And just think, with all their technology and security and latest weaponry, nothing can be done to stop them. That's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be awesome. And I've emphasized this before when I talk about the end time on the radio, that this shows just how powerful God's people are going to be during this time. And you can read in the book of Revelation the kind of awesome powers God's prophets will have to stop the rain, to turn waters to blood, to smite the earth with any kind of deadly plague as many times as they want. So much so that at the end of their testimony, when God finally allows them to be killed, the wicked people of the world are going to call a holiday and send each other gifts to celebrate the demise of these two prophets who the Bible says tormented them that dwell on the earth. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, exactly. Because they can call down plagues as often as they want to. This will be on TV. People will see these two witnesses. They'll know that nobody can stop them, at least until they're finished with their witness. Of course, finally the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. and their bodies will lie in the street for 3.5 days, and they won't suffer their bodies to be put in the grave. And of course, they'll rejoice, they send gifts one to another, and I'm sure the Antichrist and the world government, they're all gloating, like, look, we killed these 2 witnesses, see, we're the government, the Antichrist is God, and nothing can stop us. See, we won, we killed these 2 witnesses. So therefore, we're stronger, and our, world government will continue on.
It's never completely dark when you're listening to Nightlight.
Joe, I think this will be an encouragement to many of our listeners to know that these terrible events that you read about in Revelation chapter 8 and 9, when the angels blow those tribulation trumpets, that these things are happening as judgments on the wicked, not on God's children who are being protected from these judgments. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. The trumpets are geared to the people of the world who had received the 666 mark of the beast, whatever form that will take. So these trumpets are, causing them trouble, causing them tribulation. And we're protected in Revelation 7:3. It talks about, the sealing of the saints, that we're protected against some of these plagues and some of these things that are happening during the tribulation trumpets. But again, our challenge is, of course, says the Antichrist will make war against the saints. So, of course, he's trying to stop us from, preaching the gospel, exposing his plan, exposing who the Antichrist is, and warning people not to be partakers of this economic system, 666 chip implant. So, of course, he's going to be trying to wipe us out, but the Lord's going to protect a lot of us. A lot of us are going to make it through, not all, but there'll be millions of Christians still here when Jesus comes back with power and great glory immediately after the tribulation.
The Son of God in heaven, and he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, and the angels shall gather together his chosen. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of God, coming in the clouds of heaven with power and glory. They shall see the Son of God. They'll see Jesus coming in the clouds of heaven with power and glory. Everyone who sees the Son and believes on him, he will raise up at the last day. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, the trumpet shall sound, the dead shall be raised, and we shall be changed. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of God. They'll see Jesus coming in the clouds of heaven with
Well, that song brings us to the happy ending of the first of two programs that lay out for you a roadmap all the way through the major events of the end time and beyond. On this program, we've covered the major events of the last 7 years that culminates with the second coming of Jesus Christ. In part 2, we'll be talking about events that happen after Jesus' second coming. That includes the marriage supper of the Lamb, the Battle of Armageddon, the millennial reign of Christ on earth, all the way through to the new heaven and the new earth as described in the final 2 chapters of the Bible. So there's a lot more to look forward to and a lot more to cover. Joe, thanks so much for being with us once again. Looking forward to the next time. Anything more you want to say to wrap up this segment?
Yes, I would like to say one thing. The time to get ready for these events that we covered is now. These signs of the times, folks, are happening. They're happening now. The world government is rising now. It's not yet in power, but you can see that they're making many moves through war, economic collapse, disasters. So I believe that they're really trying to make their move. We're in it. We're in it now. We're in these signs. We're seeing things happening. Folks, things are happening. We need to really prepare now and get ready for these final signs at the end.
Nightlight, keeping you in tune with the times.
Well, the music on today's program has been from a classic album of songs called The Lion, the Beast and the Dragon by the New Beat Band that take you all the way through the major events of the end time, the lyrics being scriptures directly quoted from the King James Version of the Bible. We'll go out with one more song from that album, and I look forward to being back with you next time for another edition of Nightlight.
Of the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased in the time of the end. The chariots will rage in the streets, they will jostle one against another in the broadways. Chariots will rage in the streets, they will seem like torches, they will run like lightnings. In the time of the end, the love of many shall grow cold, and they shall depart from the faith in the time of the end. Shall grow worse and worse, they shall turn away from the truth and turn unto fables. They shall be ever learning, yet never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. There shall be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. The hearts of men failing them for fear in the time of the end. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness. This gospel shall be preached unto all nations, and only then shall the end come. We're living in the time of the end. We're living in the time of the end.